Okay, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. Colorado Department of Labor and Employment weekly press briefing. We have Joe Barella, Executive Director of CDLE, Phil Spessart, Acting UI Division Director, Ryan Gedney, Senior Economist. I'm Cher Hoven, Deputy Executive Director and Chief Communications Officer. This morning, we will be updating you on the implementation of Phase 2 of the Continued Assistance Act. These are the federal extended benefits. We rolled out Phase 1 previously we've been reporting on, and so we're prepared to update you on our plans for Phase 2 rollout. Quick update on call center and then take your questions. So with that, I will turn it over to Joe Barella.
Thank you, Cher. Good morning, everyone. I hope you continue to stay safe and well. Great news this morning. I'd like to announce and let everyone know that starting on Saturday, February 20th, which is earlier than we anticipated last time we talked, that we will roll out Phase 2 for claimants. They will be able to begin certifying their weeks for the payment, filing new claims and reopening if they were moving into new programs. And so that's really exciting that we are able to finally announce that people will start being able to take care of the Continued Assistance Act Phase 2. In this phase, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, PUA, and Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, PEUC, claimants who have exhausted the balances on their claims before December 26 will be able to start certifying and receiving benefits. Also, PUA and PEUC claimants who have exhausted their balances since Phase 1 opened on the 1st of this month will also be able to start collecting benefits again. Claimants who have exhausted their regular state unemployment benefits since December 26 will be able to apply for PEUC. It will also allow new PUA claimants to file claims through the Continued Assistance Act. All new PUA filers will be required to go through the ID.me verification process. We know that this is an extra step, but it will definitely help us to reduce fraud in the system as we require new applicants to certify their identity prior to completing an application. Phase 2 will extend the PUA and the PUEC benefits up for an additional 11 weeks. I think claimants receiving benefits will also receive the federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, which we all know is the additional plus-up of $300 a week. We emailed all claimants on Tuesday who might be eligible in Phase 2 on the processes that they need to start taking today and tomorrow to be ready to certify starting on Saturday, the 20th. Keep in mind, this includes those who have exhausted since the deployment of Phase 1, and also includes those people that have exhausted prior to the 26th of December. We will continually communicate with claimants on the process and what they need to be taken care of so that they can expedite the processing and the payments getting into their accounts. We understand and we know that the gap in the benefits from when they exhausted these programs, it could have been the 26th of December or even prior to that, has been a hardship on Coloradans. But we are committed to making sure that we're doing everything possible, that our systems are in compliance with rules and regulations that are required to administer these benefits to eligible unemployment claimants at this time. And with that, I think we're going to open it up for questions so that we can address the Phase 2 rollout with myself and the team that's here today.
Thanks, Joe. Just to follow up on a couple of things Joe addressed. So we did email 289,000 claimants earlier this week and laid out the steps that they would need to take between that email and when we are preparing to deploy tomorrow night. The system will be down to help us with deployment starting at 5:30 p.m. tomorrow night. We'll come back up at 3 a.m. on Saturday. So any claimant who needs to access the system, request a benefit payment, check on the status of their claim, will need to do so before 5:30 p.m. tomorrow. We'll be posting web alerts on coloradoui.gov and also updating our Continued Assistance Act webpage. We've already updated the virtual agent and communicating through the various channels that we have in place. We will also be sending another email to that same list that we emailed earlier this week over the next day and a half, informing them on next steps. So with that, while we wait for questions, I will go ahead and provide just a quick update on call center activity. We've seen a continued decrease in calls coming into the call center this week. We saw a 65% decrease over the previous week and a 90% decrease over the first week in February. That dramatic increase the first week of February was certainly due to the rollout of phase 1 and a lot of questions coming in with regard to who was in phase 1 and who was in phase 2. We had just almost 60 agents start in our regular UI call center this week. We added another 100 agents in the third-party call center. This week, we also announced that we're hiring a class of 50 new call center agents. We'll go ahead and drop the link to that job announcement in the chat. These would be state employees, the agents that would actually work in the division's call center, not the third-party call center. As we've reported previously, our third-party call center does have an open-ended recruitment effort in place, and they are now just hiring Colorado residents. At the end of the day, the third-party call center now has 600 agents, and again, is on a continuing open-ended recruitment call for additional support. We will be having extended call center hours this weekend to support claimant questions on phase 2. Saturday and Sunday will be 10 to 4. We'll also be announcing extended hours for next week, and all of this will be posted at coloradoui.gov. So with that, let's go ahead and go to questions. Good morning, Dennis. That is correct. We've seen close to 1 million suspected fraudulent claims. And the benefit, again, of MyUI Plus is that the fraud detectors that were in place for the PUA claims, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, are now being applied to all claims. And as Joe mentioned, the new PUA claims that will be filed after deployment this weekend of phase 2 will also need to go through the ID.me verification process, so that they won't need to be caught up in the fraud hold situation where we're seeing now where a very small percent of legitimate claims are being caught up in an integrity hold situation. By the way, as we've mentioned before, if a claimant has an integrity hold, they can complete a form at coloradoui.gov and add it to the queue for ID.me verification. Tamara, actually not at this point. We're right now, I believe, up to 25,000 ID emails a day that go to individuals who do have a program integrity hold. So we are quickly moving through any list of holds that people were experiencing. Our goal was to, once we deployed MyUI Plus on January 10th, get through that initial backlog of holds, also get through those who had taken time to either complete the form or call into the call center reporting an integrity hold. Eventually, our goal will be that all claims, including regular UI claims, will go through the ID.me process, and so that they can avoid being caught up in a delay in verifying their identity. The 1 million is since the beginning of the pandemic in terms of integrity holds. Eventually, the goal would be that all potentially fraudulent claims would have the opportunity to prove their identity. Keep in mind, going into deployment of MyUI Plus, we had, I think, just shy of 800,000 identity program integrity holds based on the PUA system and what it was holding. Again, of those 800,000, those that actually called into the call center to report an integrity hold had an opportunity to verify through ID.me. Certainly not all of those 800,000 did, and that would align with what we have suspected early on to be about anywhere from 75 to 90% of PUA claims filed were potentially fraudulent. Let's see. Ryan, update totals from phase 1 gig workers. Dennis, I'm not sure where that data point is from.
Yeah, Dennis, if you can maybe expand on that, that'd be great. Just at present, I'm not sure what exactly you're asking.
I'll go back to Katie's question. Katie, that's right. The hold times vary. This week, the average was under an hour, but it could certainly be greater than that. Again, the goal is to staff up appropriately so that folks do not have to stay on hold. Sometimes their questions are easy, but the average call handle time is actually well over 15 minutes. This is because of the complexity of the UI eligibility programs, particularly the issues that we're seeing when we now have 5 programs. Pre-pandemic, we had 1. But the goal is that both the third-party call center and our regular call center will continue to staff up, meet the needs of those claimants who do have to speak to an agent about their claim. We're updating the virtual agent. Again, we'd encourage sharing of these job announcements. We will have a rolling staffing plan in place for our regular call center as well, where we're adding 50 agents, bringing them on, training them, and then opening up new announcements for hiring new agents. Ryan, I will let you circle back with Dennis.
Hey, I think Marshall has a question that he wants to ask. Share. Marshall, go ahead.
Thanks. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Forgive me for asking a question that may have been addressed in the past. I've received a lot of email lately about people who are receiving Relia cards in the mail they never asked for, and they're wondering, what's the scam? Like, how is it that these fraudulent claims, the people trying to do this, if I just ignore it, am I putting myself at risk somehow that someone else is going to get the money? And how the heck would they get the money if I got the card?
Thanks, Marshall, for the question. So just by way of brief background, the PUA system, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, nationally was more susceptible to fraud given the lack of W-2 wage verification processes in place. So we started to see an increase in fraud due to identity theft. Keep in mind, it wasn't a security breach on behalf of attempts to CDLE systems or databases. The victims that we're seeing with victims of unemployment insurance fraud are actually victims of identity theft. Their identity has been stolen at some point in time in the past, and perhaps their only indication that that has happened is because they're now a victim of unemployment insurance fraud. So without delivering to you a playbook that the criminals are using, the Relia card is the default method of payment. And so when somebody files a fraudulent claim, the Relia card goes to the victim, but the criminal has put into place other mechanisms with which they're able to draw down those fraudulent benefits. The most important thing somebody can do is report that at coloradoui.gov through the fraud form. That will notify us that it has been a fraudulent claim and we can close the claim. For the most part, the victim who's receiving the Relia card, there will not be any funds on that card, but it is important for them to notify us immediately so we can close that claim. It's also important for them to notify the 3 credit reporting agencies and report it to identitytheft.gov. All of those to protect themselves. Keep in mind, there's very little, if any, damage that can be done to an individual's credit because somebody stole their identity and filed an unemployment claim. There's certainly a greater amount of damage that can be done with the other crimes that they're committing with that stolen identity. So the most important thing to do is report it to us. We're actually in the process of automating the claim shutdown process once it's reported to us and flagged as potential fraud. I'm going to see if Phil has anything to add.
I am going to jump in a little bit here, Marshall. A couple other things you'll need to know related to that. Individuals who receive that Relia card after they report the fraud to us on the fraud form, oftentimes we're finding these claims. We already have a series of fairly robust and aggressive fraud hold indicators going on claims. So many of these already have holds on them, but it allows us to move that claim to confirmed fraud once it's reported to us and followed up on. Now, once a party reports the fraud to us, they may complain and think we haven't shut anything down because part of the process with the system automatically generates additional documentation related to those claims. We have not been as effective as we could be related to communicating with those people, letting them know once they file that fraud report, the report has been received, and oh, by the way, please be aware you may continue to receive forms related to this claim and that you can disregard those forms. Same thing goes, Marshall, because at some point you're going to have employers coming to you and asking I reported this also. Why am I still getting documents? For the exact same reason. At this point, the system isn't built to be able to stop those forms from going out when the claim is first filed, but we can stop payment on them and we prevent payment on them. Part of the reason that we're moving to ID.me and ultimately across the entire platform is to minimize those number of forms that even go out to parties that they would have to report. That's not to say that when ID.me is in place that it's going to be 100% perfect and it's going to stop 100% of the fraud. So we would still look after that's implemented to still be implementing our standard fraud holds that the system looks at for certain characteristics on claims. And we would still be relying on individuals who, where one happened to sneak through, to be reporting that to us immediately.
Thanks, Phil. Brian, did you want to circle back with Dennis's question?
Yeah, I'll try to circle back. Dennis, if I'm not making sense, we could just loop back after this. But what we're seeing is that for the week ending the 13th, we had approximately 40,000 individuals request payment within PUA, and about 25,800 individuals request payment within PEUC. And again, these are just individuals who are eligible for the phase 1 rollout. Now, I don't have the FPUC totals here. I only have FPUC totals available for all program types, but for PUA over the past 2 weeks, about 48 million has been paid out to PUA claimants. And again, that does not include FPUC, just your base PUA payments. PEUC, a little over 56 million over the past 2 weeks. If we include all programs, that includes regular UI, we've paid out a little over 200 million in the last 2 weeks in FPUC. And again, that's the $300 a week. Let me know if you need anything else, Dennis.
Thanks, Ryan. I think let's go back to Tamara has a question about the phase 2 process for exhausted claims. And I'm going to try and address this. I think Joe mentioned it at the beginning of his remarks, Tamara. Those who have had exhausted PUA claims will need to go in. Phil, maybe instead of guessing, let me send it to you. Do they need to file a regular state claim?
So if they were on the PUA program, Tamara, then if they've exhausted it, they are required to go in and file the brand new state claim first. This, again, is a requirement from the federal government. It's really a check at quarter changes to ensure they're not eligible for a state claim in any other state, whether it be Colorado or one of our neighboring states. If they qualify monetarily for a state claim, they cannot be on PUA any longer, and they have to follow through with that state claim. Once verified, so 24 hours after they open that state claim, if it comes back and shows that there are no wages, then the reopen link will show for those individuals to reopen their PUA claim at that point in time. Important to know that if you're on a computer, that link is going to be in your left-hand navigation. If you are using a smartphone, you will have to search for that link by using the hamburger menu to actually find the link. And so that once that shows up, that allows you to reopen the PUA claim. PEUC claims will be different because those are already on or had been on state benefits. So they should immediately be able to see that reopen link for them to reopen it either again on the smartphone, looking at the hamburger menu, or on a computer looking in the left-hand side navigation. And I'll finish up because I just caught the last part of your question here, Tamara. All of these claims, when they're being reopened, will backdate. So we've talked about two different groups of people today. Individuals who exhausted prior to December 26th, when they reopen that PUA claim or that PEUC claim, it will automatically backdate to be effective 12/27 or December 27th. And then they will be able to request payment for those prior weeks at that time that they do the reopen. For individuals who had been in phase 1 and have subsequently exhausted their benefits and they are now reopening a PUA claim or the PEUC claim, at that point, it will backdate to the last week to which they were able to certify, allow them to fill in all those weeks on certification requests at that time, and pay them in a lump sum, including the additional $300 FPUC payments.
Could I ask our moderator just make sure that we've let folks in from the waiting room as well? Thank you. So let's go back to Blair's question about the number of people in phase 2. This is a tricky one for a couple of reasons. Number one, we have people who were in phase 1 because of the backdating to 12/27 exhausted the balance on their claims. Those people then automatically were pushed into phase 2. In addition, anyone who was part of phase 1 exhausting their claim at any point between phase 1 and phase 2 would be in phase 2. So there really isn't a static number to attach to phase 2 claimants. That's why the email population was 289,000, because it could potentially include those on phase 1 that we were notifying about phase 2. The reality is at the end of phase 2, we hope we've captured the majority of claimants who would have been eligible for either phase, and also eligible for the other phases that we've mentioned previously. Phil, anything to add there?
No, I think you hit that one there. But as long as I'm on, I think we've ignored Katie Weiss's question about reporting long phone wait times. So sorry, Katie.
I addressed that, Phil. I addressed that.
About the hour and that we're continuing hiring.
Yeah.
I will note one other piece here, Katie. We're looking to adjust how our actual in-house call center operates too. As you'll note, it's been strictly a callback center at this point in time, so we're looking to be able to adjust that so individuals that might have more complex issues to deal with that the third-party vendor wouldn't be able to help could be able to get through directly to our staff in a more timely manner. I'm going to follow up a little bit on this, Katie, only because when I first started for this department in this division in 1992, that was during a period of extended benefits. When I was working in the call center, which is where I initially hired in, there were 120 of us at the time that I hired in. And you know what? People couldn't get into the call center at that time either during that period of extended benefits. It was a volume issue. People would wait 3 hours if they could even get in, or they would get the busy tone. Every time that we've had an extended benefits program, because of the sheer volume, it has always been a challenge to be able to answer all of those incoming phone calls. That's not just for us as a state, that is for any of the other jurisdictions that also administer unemployment insurance programs. So each of us struggle with the same thing. That doesn't mean that we don't look to continue to improve it and continue to try different means by which to answer those calls. That was the reason initially that we changed to a callback center, which allowed people to actually create a specific time when they would receive a call and not have to be trying to call in every day and getting that busy signal. Now, again, as we've gone along, it's apparent we need to still make some changes in that area. So we will continue to change and adjust to better serve our customers.
Thanks, Phil. I will add, I remember during the Great Recession when Phil and I were here trying to manage claimant communication, we had hold times over 5 hours. And so again, the virtual agent was not the one-size-fits-all solution. It's a process of implementing solutions and then creating a hybrid approach to addressing the volume. I want to circle back to the question from Dennis about how many have been released and how many how much we've released. So looks like we've released just about 28,000 fraud integrity holds, Dennis, totaling about $25 million. And we've emailed 114,000 claimants with the option to complete the ID.me verification process. Other questions? $1099s. Well, that's pretty broad, Charles, but let me see if I can.
Yeah, Charles had an earlier question about how much
fraud. Sorry,
how many fraud claims have we discovered through people reporting the need for a corrected 1099? Charles, I'd have to be able to dig to find you some updated information. The last I had seen was, I believe it was around 8,000 requests had come in for corrected 1099s. Of which a good chunk of those corrected 1099s have already gone back out. And again, some of these were within the state system that we didn't have quite the capability to close down as quickly as we could once we moved into this brand new system and established those fraud holds. So again, many of these 1099s coming back in and asking for correction are claims that we have shut down, but there was a timing issue related to the 1099s going out versus when fraud holds actually ended up on some of those claims. Again, because it was a manual process before those state claims moved over. Remember, we've talked a couple of weeks in a row about seeing that uptick in activity that made no sense related to our economy the last few weeks of December. And as we were looking, those were fraudulent, and we began putting holds on those manually. And then again, once we were able to move over January 10th, we were able to do those in one fell swoop to get all the rest of the holds on.
Oh, Charles. So Phil, I saw one here I lost. The 7.5 million request to the JBC, Phil and Joe, I thought that was for our technology upgrade for cats. But maybe I'm misremembering here exactly what this request is. It's from Dennis, 7.5 million JBC request.
Yeah, I would need more details here. This is Joe. You know, our request to the JBC was for the tech build for the tax side, the employer side, and to modernize that system. So looking at where you're getting that 7.5 million, I would need more detail of specifically what you're asking, and we can answer your question offline. I know that to the JBC, our ask with our tech build, earmarked for fraud added to 40 million. So
we can get back with you, Dennis, on that, unless any of our policy folks on the call.
Yeah, and I would jump into and say, Dennis, you know, dependent of that, fraud is going to be an ongoing issue, right? And it will need to be one, this new version of fraud or newer version of fraud in the UI world will be ongoing. It's not going to stop when PUA ends. It's not going to stop when PEUC ends. So it will be something that we will have to handle and make sure we have funded and have funding every year to handle those issues and to prevent those, right? Related to regular state benefits, that's a cost, and that's a cost to employers in this state because the employers pay the premiums that fund the program and fund the benefits. Right now, it's a cost to employers. It's also a cost to the federal taxpayer related to PUA, and we have a fiduciary responsibility to both the federal taxpayer and also to those employers that pay premiums into our system. To answer your other question, Dennis, how does Colorado's level of fraud claims compare to other states? I believe what we've found and what we've stopped or held related to fraud is consistent with what other states have been hit with before they even found it. So if you're looking at dollar amounts, our dollar amounts so far, we have prevented, and I'd have to go back to remember the figure, we have prevented a large sum of money from going out. I thought it was around $7 billion. If you compare that to the state of Washington, they lost $600 million before they even caught anything. We believe on the most recent numbers that we had, that we paid out about 6 million, somewhere over 6 million in fraud. So that's substantially better than Washington. It speaks to Mr. Gedney here and some other individuals within our department who look at those numbers every week related to claims being filed, who ask questions when something doesn't look right away. And that allows us to react in a far quicker manner and then start acting in a more proactive manner to prevent it. So we were one of the first states to start these fraud holds up front, and they are aggressive. We know that we are still catching some innocent victims up in those fraud holds. So Dennis, you need to understand that every week we also go through a lengthy process with a vendor where we continue to try to adjust those fraud holds. We end up having to place new fraud holds in every week because these fraudsters, once they find out you're stopping something, they try something very different.
Yeah, and thank you, Phil. I think that was very comprehensive in what the department really looks at. You know, our primary purpose is to get eligible claimants benefits as quickly as possible. in this new world with the pandemic, we've discovered that we've had to stand up a system that is very robust for fraud prevention. And now we have to look at how do we look at investigation, enforcement of fines, and then actually collections. And so this is not just a Colorado problem. It's a multi-state problem that will take many, many local partners, state partners, as well as national partners, the Department of Justice, the State Selective Service, the Treasury Department, the Department of Labor, as we look at how to prevent fraud and start collecting money that was paid out fraudulently to these criminals.
Thanks, Joe. Before we move on to Ryan's report, wanted to see if Daniel Chase wanted to add in. I think he has some things to add to help with some of the questions outstanding.
The one I wanted to clarify here, Cher, is the JBC 7.5 million. I found where you got that number. So just to clarify a little bit, the JBC process, the UI division is federally funded in almost its entirety, and that the only outlier to that is the technology upgrades portion, as the federal government has not chosen that they will be responsible for that side of the UI part or UI division. But in terms of the 7.5 million, that was a JBC guess at how much they would increase our informational line items. So they don't appropriate federal funds to our department. Our department receives those federal funds and can spend them at will. The JBC was guessing that we would receive another about 7.5 million in federal funding for fraud recovery. At this point, we have received additional federal funds for that's earmarked specifically for fraud, and we would also expect that amount to increase from the federal government.
Daniel, as long as you have the floor, do you want to speak to the ability to certify for weeks on Saturday or?
Yes. Yeah. So phase 2 will launch, as they've all said, on Saturday. At this moment, claimants will be able to reopen their claims in PEUC and PUA. At this point, we have not confirmed the functionality to immediately certify for payment weeks. So when we launched phase 1, you reopened your claim and certified for payment that same day. We are currently expecting the certify for payment have to batch overnight. So that will then become available on Sunday to people who reopen their claims on Saturday. We are working to try to get that functionality online by Saturday, but we're not sure we'll get there by then. But the latest people will be able to certify would be then Sunday, where those weeks will appear for them to certify.
Thanks, Daniel. I think we have some outstanding questions. Can we go ahead and turn it to Ryan for his brief update, and then we'll return to questions.
Thanks, Cher. Just a couple talking points here, data-wise. For the week ending February 13th, for regular UI, again, this is fraud adjusted, but we estimate there were 12,151 initial claims for regular UI. For PUA, that's 8,000. Again, that's also fraud adjusted. The 8,000 is just for those who are reopening their claim and are eligible for the phase 1 rollout. For continued claims, regular UI, about 70,000 continued weeks claimed for the week ending February 6th. And that level has hovered around 70 to 72,000 over the past few weeks. For PUA, for same week, 67,500 continued weeks claimed. And for PEUC, 47,300 continued weeks claimed. That does include backdating. Individuals can request payment for multiple weeks going back to the week beginning December 27th. So in an attempt to kind of break out like how many individuals are requesting, we started a new series. I've also added this data series to the suite of charts that we provide within the press release each week, that PDF. So we estimate that a little over 129,000 claimants filed continued claims over the week of the 13th. Again, they're requesting payment. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll receive payment, but again, they're requesting payment. That was 63,500 for regular UI, 40,000 approximately for PUA, and about 25,800 for PEUC. In terms of benefits, regular UI, 26 million paid out. Again, that's just the base. That doesn't include FPUC for the week ending February 13th. For regular UI, a little over 51 million over the past 2 weeks. As I mentioned earlier, a little over 48 million in PUA over the past 2 weeks, 19 million for the week of the 13th. PUC, we distributed at 15 million. And in FPUC for the week ending the 13th, paid out 55 million to all eligible claimants, and a little over 201 million over the past 2 weeks. So from January 31st to February 13th, departments paid out a little over 350 million in benefits. Again, that's to regular UI, PUA claimants, PUC claimants, and FPUC for all those eligible. Just since March 29th of last year is when we really started seeing benefits tick upwards, benefit payments and claims tick upwards due to the pandemic. Departments paid out about 7.3 billion in all benefits. And finally, for borrowing, the departments borrowed about 823 million since mid-August. Charles, to answer your question, for the county level data, we're still working through some reporting issues that are preventing us from publishing any county level data, any industry level data. We do hope to get that resolved at some point soon, but at this point, I do not have an estimate for you. But I will certainly keep you all posted on that progress, or when we do finally break through and are able to publish that data, and we'll also post it on LMI Gateway. With that, I'm happy to answer questions and send it back to Cheryl.
Thanks, Ryan. I think we have one outstanding question about the number of claimants in phase 2. As we mentioned, this isn't a static number for a number of reasons, including exhaustions that happened since phase 1, or folks who exhausted because of the backdating that occurred from the effective date of the legislation and phase 1 rollout. So again, we believe the 289,000, while it could include phase 1 claimants, that's important because at some point those phase 1 claimants may roll into phase 2. So we don't have a firm number, a hard and fast number on who specifically is in phase 2. Let's see.
Chair, I'm going to go back and clarify because Dennis had asked a follow-up question about, was that 7 billion in stop fraud claims the department didn't pay out? That's correct. You heard that correctly, Dennis. We believe we prevented $7 billion of funds going out on fraudulent claims by instituting those holds as quickly as we did.
Yeah.
Hey, Phil, also, I think the clarity on the question on the RELIA cards being received by individuals, if there's a fraud hold on the claim, there is never money put onto that RELIA card, correct? So, for the far majority of fraudulent claims, when the RELIA card goes out, there's no money on that card. Money is loaded once that claim is approved and is not in a fraud hold. So I think that's also a clarity that we need to make for folks.
Thanks, Joe. So question about programming times. Keep in mind, some of these provisions we would never have been able to implement in the old system. That's one of the benefits of the MyUI Plus system upgrade. During the recession, some of the extensions took as much as 12 weeks to reprogram. And there are other states who still have yet to reprogram their systems for continued assistance. It depends on the complexity of the package that comes down from Congress. The more complicated they make these programs, the more difficult they make the programming requirements. So we certainly are advocating our congressional leaders to please try to make this next round of benefits as simple as possible to reduce programming time and ease the burden on the states. Certainly that gets benefits into the hands of people who need them quicker. And there needs to be an acknowledgement at the congressional level that states do need to reprogram their systems, which takes time. And the longer it takes, the more difficult it becomes for people who desperately need these funds. So we're hoping for a less complicated package to be delivered in the next round of stimulus benefits. Joe or Phil, anything to add?
Sure,
Yeah.
Sharon. I think it's important to state, these were not extensions. They were 4 new programs that we had to put into deliverables. And so, yes, they added 11 weeks to people, but we had to verify that they were eligible for these 4 new programs. And so, it is not simply it doesn't do us any justice to say they're just extensions. Why am I getting my money? Why is it taking so long? Cher hit it exactly right. These are new programs that our systems need to be programmed and make sure that they follow a process on eligibility to get them to where they are. Last count, in my conversations, there are 12 different paths that people can take to get to where they are today on unemployment, with regular unemployment and all the federal programs that have come out. And so, we need to make sure that we are following the rules and regulations so that we're in compliance with the law, but also we're getting money out as expeditiously as possible to people during these times, as Phil referred to as in extension programs.
Right. And I'll jump in a little here too, Tamara, because part of that question here was length of programming. The real question is what could be done best to try to avoid a gap for citizens who are suffering at this point in time. When Congress waits until a program ends to take any action, and then we have to await additional information from U.S. dollar guidelines, that creates those gap weeks for individuals where they continue to struggle, where they are very frustrated, where they can't pay their rent, they can't pay their mortgage, and they fall behind on bills. So while we can catch them up later on, a lot of that damage has already been done to those individuals financially. My comfort level would have been that Congress had something done this week and that it was signed by the president by Friday. I would have a comfort level there that we could probably look at rolling something out to minimize or have no gap. That hasn't happened at this point in time. Members of Congress are off this week, meaning that this important work isn't getting done for citizens out there, not just in Colorado, but in every state who are suffering and struggling during this period of time. This is a point where individuals need to use the power that they have to be pressing their representatives to get something done. The more they can press those representatives to get something done, the quicker states can react and get those programs implemented and avoid these types of gaps.
Well, and I just want to add to that, the latest intel I'm getting is that the Senate will take this up and vote on any package from the Biden administration on March 14th. Guess what? That's when this Continued Assistance Act expires. And so if that happens, we will again go into a gap where we have to shut down cases and wait for guidance to come out, program systems, and then start paying. So we're in the same position we were in December. And so, I want to make sure you all understand that, my team has been working nonstop, tirelessly to get programs into systems and design so that we can be in compliance and get money out to people as quickly as possible. And we're committed to do that. But we have been doing this now for almost 12 months as we try to deal with the financial implications of the pandemic. And the department is doing everything we can, and we want to do more to make sure that the people who need the money can get it as quickly as possible. That's our commitment.
Thanks, Joe. Any updates on phase 3 and beyond? I think we kind of touched on this earlier, Tamara. The way we've been able to structure phase 2, we hope that between 1 and 2, we've captured the majority of claimants who would be eligible for continued assistance. There could be some other groups that we identify throughout the deployment of phase 2, but we feel that both phases have been comprehensive enough that it will generally capture most claimants who would be benefiting from continued assistance. Anything else?
Sure, there's a question on phase 3 from Tamara, and I believe this is the mixed income unemployment compensation program.
Yeah, I kind of touched on that just now.
Okay.
So
okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to see, does Phil have anything to add with what we thought would be 2 additional phases, but we've been able to, we believe, capture most everybody in the first 2?
Yeah, beyond what you said, is that we were able to shorten up the period for an individual who had very complicated claims jumping between systems when we had a separate PUA system and then the separate state system, where they might have started in PUA and then they had moved over into the state system. Those individuals were initially going to be phase 4. But with some hard work with the individuals within the department and with our vendor, we were able to come up with the ability to be able to roll all of those individuals up into phase 2. Will there be a few people who get missed somehow? That may be unfortunate and may still occur, and those will still need to be worked on. But we will do everything that we can to make sure that we're not negatively impacting those individuals. In other words, we believe we have caught all those individuals to be able to have them in phase 2. Phase 3, that mixed earner unemployment compensation, that is far more difficult to program. There are multiple states at this point in time, Tamara, that are having difficulty in being able to program and roll out that MEUC program. We're working on it. It is what we believe to be, again, to these individuals, not an extremely small population, but in the overall scheme of individuals that we're trying to get benefits to, an extremely small population. I believe that numbers that we show would be less than 2,000 individuals would qualify for the actual use of the mixed earners income. And that is because how those wages that they have to provide proof of wages are calculated would be based on their gig employment, which is based off of net income and not gross income. And there are a very small number of people who would end up qualifying at that point. So to the extent, Tamara, that if Congress all of a sudden, right, came up with an extension where we needed to choose between MEUC and getting a rollout to avoid a gap in benefits for a far larger number of people, in excess of 289,000 individuals, we would work on making sure we took care of those 289,000 individuals first before going back to program that MEUC. But understand there are multiple states struggling with trying to get that program up and running.
Thanks, Phil. Elvira, we'll have to follow up with you offline if that's okay to troubleshoot your question. Any other questions? Just a reminder, all of the updates on continuous assistance will be on coloradoui.gov shortly if they aren't already. We will be sending out a follow-up press release this morning, recapping everything we discussed in today's call, including the recording to the call and talking points. So if you think of anything that you forgot to ask, please do get in touch. I neglected to acknowledge Jessica Smith, our new UI press secretary. Please direct questions to her. This is great on-the-job training for her. I think she's going into week 3, but please do direct questions to her. And with that, we'll conclude the call. Ryan, do you want to just mention again where we are with benchmarking in case folks are looking for the January unemployment rate?
Yeah, sure thing, Cher. So as we mentioned before, we're going through our annual benchmarking process that impacts our monthly job numbers and our unemployment rate, labor force numbers. We will publish January data as well as benchmark data. So that's going to be revised data for 2020 on March 15th, and we'll have a corresponding press release and press call that day as well. So on March 15th, a little under a month from now. And that's a Monday.
Those dates are also available at LMI Gateway, colmigateway.com, I think
that's right.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.